Hello to you, I do hope you're well. Welcome back to my Teaching Updates YouTube channel. I'm Wardle, and in this week's video I thought I would sit down and have a chat about something that I'm really interested in, which is how we deal with disrespect and rudeness from students in schools. And I think that this is something that actually a lot of teachers in a lot of schools are dealing with and are facing at the moment. I mean, I certainly found this when I first started in the classroom. I was quite shocked, I have to say, at how disrespectful and how rude some students were coming across. And I had to take a step back really and think, okay, what do I do about this? You know, obviously when you go into teaching, you're thinking about how you're going to get your students the best grades, how you're going to support them in their academic learning. But I think it's really important actually we remember we're not just teaching them academically, we are as teachers helping to model and explicitly teach them about good manners, about social skills, and about how to treat people with respect. And so, as I say, I think this is a really important area of education in terms of that character curriculum, in terms of how we are actually teaching our students to be polite and respectful, and how that's really important because it prepares them for life in the modern world. Because, you know, they will go out into society where they will be interacting with different people, they'll be working with different people, and it is really important that they don't just have qualifications on paper, but actually they've got those really important social skills and that etiquette and those good manners which will serve them really well in their interactions with other people. So yes, I thought I would sit down today and share with you some of the things that I do in terms of dealing with disrespect and, encouraging really good manners and positive social skills. And this is in my capacity as a classroom teacher, of course, especially as I say in my first few terms as a teacher, but also now in my role as the head of year, taking that overall responsibility for 200 students. You know, it really does make me think, how can I help them to become the best individuals that they can possibly be? And as I say, that's not just about their academic progress, but it's also about the development of their character and their social skills as well. So my first thing with this is you must not take it personally, because certainly when I first started in teaching, I did take it personally, and I would see students being quite rude and disrespectful towards me, and I would then see them being a completely different way with another member of staff, with a more senior member of staff, for example. And I would take that personally, and it would upset me. I'd go home and I'd be like, oh, great, I'd feel really upset about it, for want of a better word. And it was really important for me to learn very quickly, do not take it personally. And that is something that I learned from my head of department and mentor, who has been teaching now for over 30 years. And he said that to me. He said, Ben, do not take it personally. And you have to take that emotion out of it, because that then allows you to be the best professional you possibly can be. So, in those first few weeks and indeed terms, that was a really important thing for me to say, okay, don't take this personally. And so what that then allows you to do, as I say, is to respond in a really professional way. And I think the most important thing to say is don't despair when this happens, Don't take it personally, and do not despair when it happens. You've got to see it as a learning opportunity. You've got to see it as a really positive opportunity to help this young person to become the best that they can be. In the same way that we shouldn't ever label and write off a student as dumb, for example, based on their academic abilities, we should never write off or label a student as rude or disrespectful, for example, and think, well, that's it, there's nothing I can do, they're rude, and that's the end of the story. In the same way that we are all about helping students make academic progress, we should be all about helping them to make progress in terms of developing their manners, developing their social skills, and helping them to become really polite, respectful individuals. So, you know, you've got to see it as a chance to make a change. You've got to see it as an opportunity to educate. And so, you know, you've got to use all of those tools that you would use if you're supporting a student academically. You know, when you're thinking, how can I make this student make progress academically? And you think about your modelling, you think about your scaffolding, and you think about your explicit instruction. You've got to think about those same key skills and resources when it comes to developing their character. And as I say, this is all about that character curriculum, isn't it? It's not just about a student's academic progress, but it's also about their progress as a person, if you like, because that is our role as teachers. We're not just teaching and helping students to gain those qualifications, but we're also shaping them and moulding them as individuals. And that is such a privilege, isn't it? You know, it's such a privilege. And so it's something that we've got to take really quite seriously. And, you know, one quote that I really like to keep in mind when I think about this is Nelson Mandela. Everybody knows that famous quote from him where he says, nobody is born hateful. Nobody is born hating other people. So they must have learnt that from somewhere. And he says, therefore, if you can learn to be hateful, then you can learn to love, because love comes much more naturally to the human being. Now, I don't know where you stand on the states of nature debate, you know, whether you side with the school of scholars who would say that, you know, we are born into a state of greed and selfishness like Thomas Hobbes, or whether you would side with Jean-Jacques Rousseau and that idea that there is nothing as gentle as man in his primitive state. But, you know, what I would say is that I really believe Mandela is right, that everything is learned. If we think about John Locke and his idea of tabula rasa, we're all born a blank slate. And so everything is about learning through experience and learning from our environment. And it's really important, I think, to remember that not all students have had the same environment or the same upbringing as you have. Now, obviously, you know, it seems like I'm stating the obvious there, but again, this is something that my mentor and head of department spoke to me about when I first started teaching. You know, he said not everybody is going to be like you. They're not going to think in the same way as you. When I was there, like, but why aren't they being polite? Why aren't they saying please and thank you? You know, why is this happening? And, you know, it's really important to remember that actually not everybody has had those same background formative experiences as you. You know, so if I think about it, for example, my parents and my grandparents really instilled in my brother and I the importance of being polite and respectful. You know, they modelled it, so in all of their interactions with people they were polite and respectful, but they also explicitly taught it to us. You know, you don't laugh at people, you use manners, you say please, you say thank you, you hold doors open, you know, you're not rude to people, for example. So that was something that I had in my home life, at home, from, as I say, both my parents and my grandparents. And then also at school, I went to a Catholic school and I absolutely loved it. And I think actually this is something that Catholic schools do very well in terms of that character curriculum, you know, the development of those good moral values within individuals. You know, at our school, for example, there were 5 core values which I can still remember to this day, because that is how immersed we were in them. So they were respect, honourable purpose, compassion, stewardship, and I've now forgotten the 5th one. Brilliant. Oh dear, right, hang on, what were they? Oh, stewardship, that's it. Respect, compassion, honourable purpose, cooperation and stewardship. They were the 5 core values. And, you know, there was a really big emphasis in the school, not just on academic excellence, but on the development of good character as well. And of course, you know, that precedes Catholicism and Christianity, doesn't it? We trace that back to Aristotle and his virtue ethics and the importance of consciously cultivating good virtues to develop your good character. But what I'm saying, the reason I'm bringing you this example is that, you know, if somebody maybe hasn't been explicitly taught the importance of those manners, it's not their fault, is it? You know, in the same way, if somebody has grown up in, you know, a homophobic household, for example, or, you know, in a sexist or racist environment, then those views are going to maybe be quite natural to that student or to that individual. And that is, of course, not about criticising anybody's parenting or, you know, the environment in which a child has been brought up. But it is about being mindful that you can't just assume that students are going to know to use good manners, or that they are going to know that saying something in a certain way isn't quite right. So what I'm saying is we must never assume that students will just know how to express themselves, or that they should just know to be polite and use good manners and follow those basics of etiquette, such as holding doors open, for example. And so it's really important to focus on explicitly teaching those good manners and those respectful behaviours, you know. And as I said earlier, it's about teaching those things in the same way that you would teach something academically. So in the same way that you would teach the key knowledge a student needs for your subject, you need to teach them the key skills they need to be polite, respectful individuals. So you have to be modelling what you expect. You know, you can't expect a student to be respectful towards you if you're not showing them respect, of course. So you've got to model as a teacher. You've got to be that role model who is, you know, demonstrating what respect looks like and what it sounds like. You know, I can't be going, oi you, you know, oi you, give me that. You know, you've got to model, excuse me, please could you pass me the, etc. You get my gist, hopefully. You've got to model it yourself. You've got to remember you are the role model. You are setting the example. But then you've also got to explicitly instruct. You've got to be very clear about what it is you want. You've got to say to students, I expect you to say thank you as you leave a classroom, because you need to thank your teacher for the lesson that they have delivered. I want you to say please when you ask for something, because that is good manners and it shows that you are a polite, respectful person. You know, so you've got to be really explicit about exactly what you would like students to be doing in terms of, you know, expressing a request or speaking to somebody. And you've got to include in there that explanation of why. You know, you've got to say to students the reason we do this, because I think that really maximises the buy-in, that students don't just think you're making them say please and thank you for the sake of it, but actually you are explicitly teaching them this will, you know, benefit you in the long run, because it means that you will come across as polite and respectful in modern society when you go out into society today. And so, do excuse me by the way guys, just having some green tea here. It's got to be done, guys. It's been a long day. But, you know, it's really important, as I say, to be modelling that, to be scaffolding that as well, you know, to actually give students those sentence starters that they should use when they are asking for something, for example, or when they are expressing themselves, and to be, you know, explicitly teaching. You know, one thing that I've used quite a few times when I've been calling a student out, for example, on something they've said or the way they've treated someone that's been disrespectful, you know, one example is with cover teachers. We've had, you know, since the start of the year, a very small number, but they're still significant, of issues with students in my year group who have not, shall we say, been their best when they've been in a cover lesson. And so obviously when word has got back to me about that, I have immediately gone and spoken with those students. And, you know, it's been about saying to them, you know, do you realise how that will have come across? You know, it's about saying, do you really think you should have spoken to somebody in that way? How do you think they will feel about that? How would you feel if someone spoke to you like that? You know, is that the impression you want to give of yourself? You know, and it's about being really clear with students about why something isn't acceptable, and then being really positive in saying, this is what I expect you to do next time. You know, I don't believe in writing a student off. I'm always prepared to give the benefit of the doubt, you know, as I say, especially when, you know, you've got maybe homophobic, racist, sexist language. I quite like to frame it around the, you know, maybe you didn't realise, but that is not something that we say, or that is not the way we treat people in this school, you know, and obviously in 21st century Britain. So it's really important, I think, to, you know, emphasise to students that you're not labelling them and writing them off as rude, but you're actually here to educate them and to help them. And you know, that is all about, again, remembering you are a teacher, not just a teacher of your subject, so not just a teacher academically, but also it's about remembering you're there to teach those good values, you know, those good manners, that good etiquette, because, you know, you've got to keep in mind that character curriculum as well, that we have that important role to play in helping students become the best that they possibly can be as polite, well-rounded, resilient individuals. And you know, it's important to remember as well, I think, that some students do learn this quicker, and it comes much more naturally to some students, in the same way that if, you know, parents have been reading with a child at home, you know, they might make quicker progress when they're reading in school. If a parent at home is really big on manners, then a student obviously will need less reminder and less explicit teaching in school, because it's a habit they'll already be into. But, you know, just because different students are working at a different pace, that doesn't mean we should write anybody off. In the same way, you don't just, as I said before, label a student as stupid and say, oh, well, they're never going to succeed. What's the point of teaching them? You know, you have to focus on the progress that that student can make. And you've got to think, right, this is our starting point. They don't use manners. You know, they express themselves in quite a rude way. Okay, that's our starting point. Let's make progress. You know, I'm not saying that overnight this student is going to go from being quite rude and disrespectful to being ready for sainthood, but let's take it step by step. You know, let's see what progress we can make, you know, on that journey towards them developing that, you know, real commitment to being polite, being respectful. I do say to my students, you know, there is no excuse for rudeness and disrespect. You know, we're not here to excuse it, but what I am here to do is educate and to help you, you know, to develop these positive ways of asking for things, for example, or to, you know, develop your ability to interact with people from backgrounds different to your own. I think that's important, especially in modern Britain, where we do live in such a great society because of the diversity we have. You know, it's so important that students therefore know that is something to celebrate rather than, you know, an excuse to discriminate. So that's important as well, to, you know, remember that you are helping students, because if you just, you know, give up on them and you just label them and say, oh, they're rude, not interested in them, A, that's very unprofessional and quite childish, but B, it's not doing your job as a teacher, is it? Because it's our job to prepare students for life in modern Britain. And if you like them, if you let them go through school without challenging that rudeness or disrespect, you're failing them, because when they get into the workplace, they can't be rude. When they get into the real world, they can't be disrespectful if they want to be successful. So it is our duty to instill those good manners, and it is our duty to challenge that disrespect and focus on educating. It's about education, education, and education. And included in that, of course, is that explicit instruction, it's that modelling, and it is that scaffolding. So yes, I hope you found that an interesting little discussion, shall we call it. Let me know what you think about this, you know, the importance of educating in terms of not just academics, but also in terms of that character curriculum, I can't speak now, as well. So yes, thank you for joining me. I'll be keeping you updated on all things teaching here on this YouTube channel. So do make sure you subscribe to make sure you never miss out. Thank you for watching. Have a great day, and I'll see you soon. Bye bye.